Welcome to Beyond Understood, o podcast para alunos de inglês que já conseguem se comunicar, mas querem ir além de apenas serem entendidos. Nesse episódio, o primeiro episódio, eu vou conversar com Sofia sobre imigração e tópicos relacionados, e entre uma pergunta e outra, dar meu feedback sobre o que eu gostei do inglês dela e o que nós podemos melhorar. E se você gostou do método e quer experimentar na prática, junte-se ao meu Fluency Lab. No Lab, além das sessões de speaking que seguem o formato desse podcast, você também tem acesso ao meu curso completo de pronúncia para brasileiros. Saiba mais indo no link leapfulber.com/lab. Enjoy the podcast. So today is the first episode, and it's also the episode I'm going to get canceled. Sophia is going to join me in that cancellation. It's going to be partially her fault, but let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Good.
what's the first question you had in mind?
The number one, have you ever traveled to or lived in another country?
Mm-hmm.
I lived in Portugal just for a few months. I went to the college there, and I was accepted by one of the universities there in Lisbon. And I was very excited, but a lot of things just happened, and I needed to move back to Brazil. But it was amazing because Portugal, and I had the opportunity to go to Spain too. They're amazing. They have a history that we don't have in Brazil or here in America, you know. So you
Mm-hmm.
go and you visit monuments and you visit all that old stuff and you um, go to castles and visit sites that've been there for 2,000 years. And it's just amazing, you know. Um, and then you have the culture and you have the food and how people talk and how they interact to each other. And it's just a
Mind
boom.
blowing.
Mind blowing. Yes, I
Mm-hmm.
love it. I love the opportunity. But Portugal was my first choice before moving to the US. I wanted to go back there and um, for good, but then some opportunities came up here, and here I am for it's gonna be 11 years this
Mm-hmm.
year.
Do you ever think
Mhm.
about going back to Portugal or Spain instead of staying in the US?
Mm, I don't know right now, like to live, I don't think so. I don't think so. Because even though politics here in the US is very complicated, you know, I think economically, Portugal and Spain are not in a good moment. And they've been like that for quite a while. You know, like a lot of people move from those countries to mainly to England or here, you know, because they have more opportunities, work opportunities, you know. And then Brazilians go to Portugal to work, and they are not very welcome, you know, because in they're really stealing jobs. It's not like here, you know, that immigrants come to America to do the things that Americans don't want to do, you know. The thing that in Portugal, and I'm telling you that because I have friends that moved to Portugal. There, they are really stealing jobs because there's no people to work with that, you know. The youth is going out. They are going to other countries. They don't want to stay there. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a completely different situation. So I do prefer my stability here in the US.
Nice. Stability is a nice word. I like that one as well. Nice now. I like what
Mhm.
you said about history, and one phrase people like to use a lot is to feel the history. And so when you're there, You can just
Mm-hmm.
feel the history, maybe as you
Hmm.
walk around. And I experienced that
Interesting.
a little bit when I was
Mm-hmm.
in Europe as well, because everywhere you go like, oh, this building has been around for hundreds of years. And I think
Mm-hmm.
about places in Brazil I've been, and I don't think I've seen a place like that. Like I'm going to mention in a bit, but I lived in Barcelona for a while. And the University of
Mm-hmm.
Barcelona was founded in 19, no, when was it? No, not 19. It was in the 1497, I think. So I could be
Wow.
wrong, but it's older than Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
technically is, if you consider the date of discovery as
Mm-hmm.
the anniversary of Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that is very impactful. So
Mm-hmm.
I also like to use the word sites to talk about the places. Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
whenever I visited a different site, like that very much. Not just website, but we have sites in real life.
Mm-hmm.
And mind
Mm-hmm.
blowing. Yeah, so something is mind blowing. It blows your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you don't want to
Mm-hmm.
use the word blow because maybe it sounds a bit too epic or you young, no, not young, young. Yeah, so a young way to talk about something. You could also just say it opens your
Mm-hmm.
mind. Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
open somebody's mind. Yeah, so this opened my mind to so many things.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Nice.
well, I did live abroad a little bit, as we've talked about in the
Mm-hmm.
past. So I did live in Spain, for example. And I
Mm-hmm.
do understand what you mean about the economy. I think other Europeans would say that they would use a phrase like uh, they're holding, the rest of Europe holds the economy together. Yeah, so you can use this phrase to hold something together
Mm-hmm.
to mean, hey, they are keeping it from falling into pieces. Yeah, because they
Yes.
are
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the most economically responsible country, especially Spain, I
Mm-hmm.
think, more than Portugal. Um, but yeah, and there's also this reputation, at least that's what people would tell me when I was living there, that they are like the backyard of Europe.
Yes, that's
Because
true.
people would want to
They,
have fun, they go there because the climate is
hmm
better. They have
Yes.
beaches and so on.
hmm Both countries. I went to Spain, but I didn't stay there for too long. I visited a lot of different cities, but I stayed more in Portugal. And Portugal is based on tourism. They don't have big companies or um, to hold people there, you know. So the infrastructure, even though they are considered first world, it's not first class. You know what I mean?
It's first world, but it's not
So,
first class. I like that phrasing.
mhm.
Yeah. I enjoyed my time in Spain. I was really surprised to find out that I was extroverted for Spanish standards. So I would talk to
Really?
people.
Uh,
Yeah, I had more than one person tell me, "Oh, you're so extroverted. You just talk to people." And it's like, oh, that's the first time I'm hearing that because I heard my whole life, and I always felt that I was introverted, but I was, and
uh-huh.
in some ways, Spaniards are they're still very sociable compared to, let's say, other
Yes.
European countries, but
No,
it's still
compared to
compared.
Portugal.
Yeah, compared
Mm-hmm.
to Brazilians in general, I do feel like we
Mm-hmm.
still manage to be more extroverted, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I did enjoy. I just enjoyed the whole, cosmopolitan experience because I knew people from all different kinds of countries there. When I
Mm-hmm.
was teaching there, I
Yeah.
did teach Spaniards, but I also taught at the time I taught Russians, I taught Italians. There were like Peruvians, Venezuelans, people from like everywhere. It was really, really cool. And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of I came back to Brazil and I was like, I'm ready to go again and go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
it was fun. Sometimes there are some challenges. but
Mm-hmm.
I did enjoy it very much.
It was before or after Russia?
First, I went to Spain, then I went to Russia.
Mm-hmm.
I'd
Okay.
say
Mm-hmm.
in Russia, it was a bit trickier because I left with the idea that I wasn't going to come back. Not necessarily that I was going to live in Russia for the rest of my life. That wasn't the plan, but that I wasn't going to come back to Brazil. From Russia, I was going to go somewhere else. I was actually going to go to Germany. I had made
Oh.
plans before COVID. I was all set to move,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Uh-huh.
COVID just fucked everything up.
Blew it.
That's a nice verb phrase as well, to fuck things up.
To fuck
So,
things up. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
uh,
Which are the cities that you like the most in Spain? Or which ones did you visit? Because I went
uh,
down from Badajoz, I went down to Mérida,
mhm.
and then I came back to Portugal. So I drove all the way down. So I didn't get to know Barcelona or Madrid, you
Mhm.
know. So
I've
the south
been,
is amazing.
yeah, I haven't been to many cities to be honest. I lived in Barcelona. I visited for one day Tarragona, which is nearby. And one of my
Mm-hmm.
local friends, were like, oh, the beaches in Tarragona are much better because they don't have as many tourists. So let's go there. It was okay. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been to Madrid, but it was basically just a quick layover. So I didn't even leave the airport. I just looked
Mm-hmm.
around. Um, yeah, but I like Spain, and I feel like Barcelona is still my favorite city. It
Mm-hmm.
hasn't been topped. It's not the most beautiful city, I think. For example, I remember there is this old neighborhood, I think they called in English would be like the Goth quarters. It's like the Goth
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood, Bairro Gótico or
Okay.
something like that. And it smells like
Mm-hmm.
piss. So you walk around, you can just smell urine everywhere. And people wash it. It's not like they don't wash it. They wash it. It's just
Mhm.
it stinks,
It's
like
there.
it
Mm-hmm.
stays there. And oh yeah, this is a funny story. I remember. Okay, so I was walking to the school I studied and worked at, and
Mm-hmm.
the I always had to cross Plaza Catalunya, which is like the main
Mm-hmm.
square. And there were always like people around and so on. And I saw this guy, he was sitting on one of those, it's like a big, enormous vase that has like
Mm-hmm.
grass and flowers on top of it. And he was just sitting there. And at first I thought, well, that's a weird place to sit because he's essentially sitting on the dirt. And then I saw his face and he had like this big smile on his face. And then I saw that he had his pants down. And then I realized that I was making eye contact with a homeless man taking a shit. And
Mm-hmm.
that is not something you tend to forget. It's stuck with
No.
me. I just remember like, whoa, oh, like going like that. That only
Because of
happened in
information
Barcelona.
that your brain, could just forget. But yeah,
Mhm.
my God.
That happened in
Yeah.
Barcelona. And it's like I remember another cultural shock I had probably was when I was in Berlin and I was visiting a couple of friends of mine and we were just walking around. It was like, I
Mhm.
really need to pee. I really need to pee. I really need to pee. Like, let's find a coffee shop so I can buy something and ask to use the bathroom. And they're like, yeah, come on, just pee on the street.
Mhm.
And I was like, guys, come on, and they're American for context. So I was like, come on,
Mhm.
I'm not just gonna wait. Do you think the Brazilians are monkeys? We pee on the street? What are you talking about? No, no, come on, everybody pees
Mhm.
on the street. It's like, no, come on. Yeah, okay, let's
Mhm.
go to the park. You can pee in the park. You can find a bush.
In the bush.
And yeah, so like a piece of grass, right? So for anyone who doesn't know. And we were looking for, and when we got to the park, there was like a row of bushes, and every bush
Hmm.
had a person peeing on it. So it was like a public bathroom. And
Oh my
I
God, that's terrible.
And I was like, okay, so yes, they do pee in public here, all right. So I just went for a bush, and then when I was approaching the bush, a guy came over to talk to me, and I was like, "What's happening?" And he just asked, "Hey, like, would you like some snow or whatever?" Like, I think cool. Some I
Oh,
don't remember what it
wow.
was.
Mm-hmm.
He said exactly. And I was like, no, thank you. I just want to pee. Ah, okay, brother. But then can you pee somewhere else? This is my bush because that's where he kept his drugs. So I went to another bush to do my business. And so there you go.
God, that's crazy.
Mhm.
Dang.
Germany. Germany is interesting. Many cultural
Oh, my,
differences there.
my. That's interesting. So you see, it's not just in Brazil that people pee everywhere. Oh, by the way, Los Angeles is like that.
Mm.
It's terrible. It like smells like pee everywhere you
Yeah.
go.
I'll put
Philly
these.
too.
So I'll put a few words that I mentioned here, probably bush. So that's
Mm-hmm.
a word many people end up not knowing. There's not just the
Mm-hmm.
president, but we also get
Mm-hmm.
it's the first thing that shows up is the president. Yeah, but this would be a bush. So like and you have like a sequence of bushes, a row of bushes. That's what I said, I think. Like this.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly like that, actually. Piss, another nice word for pee. Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, good fun moments.
Mm-hmm. That's
Let, let's see. I'm
so
gonna
literally he said, "Peace off from my bush."
piss off
Piss
from my
somewhere
bush.
else.
That's a good one. Yeah. Piss
Uh,
off. Get out of here. That's a good one.
mhm.
Yeah, so I put some new questions in the chat. Let's see. I'll pick
Mm-hmm.
one from the new ones and then you can pick one as well.
See. Mm. Oh. Mm.
I'll
Good
pick one and then
questions.
you can pick the other one. You can go for the more
Mm.
controversial one and I'll play safe.
Let's try to not be canceled tonight.
So, playing
Um,
safe. We have kind of touched on that a little bit, but what do you think are the biggest challenges of living in a foreign
mm.
country? So let's start with this one because I think it's simple, but it's good.
I think depends on your background, you know. I think for sure, language is something. I know people that been here for 10, 20, 30 years, and they don't speak English and they are not really interested in speaking English because you basically can do everything in your life without English, you know, here at least. You like Brazilians here, you have bakeries, you have grocery stores, you have um, everything. And then when you go to a Walmart or to TJ Maxx, to buy something, clothes or whatever, you don't really interact with people that is selling you things. It's not like in Brazil. You want to buy some shoes, you ask someone, and I believe it's still there like that. And then the guy brings you 20 of them, all colors, and then he asks and then wants to interact. No, here you do your thing. Nobody's gonna talk to you. So you basically can do things without really speaking English. And then I see couples coming, and having kids here. And then they go to school. And then they start speaking just English. And then their parents talk to them in Portuguese, but then they reply in English. And then the kids don't really learn Portuguese, and the parents don't really learn English. And then parents don't go to, that are not involved in the kids' day to day in school, because how are the teachers going to talk to them? You know, and then they needed to ask for a translator to join the conversation, because otherwise they're not going to understand, or when they go to a hospital. So I think languages is still a very big thing for most people. Um, it was not for me, because when I got here, I was already an English speaker. But of course, through the years, I improved pronunciation, improved vocabulary, grammar, all these things, because I basically just work with Americans, and I always ask them, look, if I say something wrong, please correct me. And even though they say, no, you are fine, I know that I'm not, but then there are people that my English is way better than them, you know? So it's very interesting. And through language, you get to know the culture better. You know, I understand, like, I have a personality in English and I have a personality in Portuguese. And it's very interesting, because in English I'm way more straightforward. I
Mm.
can say way more no's, and it's easy for me to say no, to set limits. This is my boundaries. You don't get to go forward than here. And in Portuguese, you have that jeitinho. You don't say no. You say, oh, I'm gonna see. Oh, I'll call her later. In English, it's just like, no, no is no. Nobody's gonna be hurt. You're not gonna hurt anyone's feeling. It's just like, no. And so,
No means no.
yeah. So English, it helped me to understand the culture better. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that language is the most complicated part. Weather is not,
Mm-hmm.
like, you have heater and AC everywhere you go. Um, Economy is stable, so you can easily get whatever you want to. You can achieve whatever you want to, but money doesn't really buy a fluent English.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a hard work. It's hard work, and a lot of people are not interested. A lot of
Yeah.
people just doesn't care. And then what I think is like, okay, you came all the way up from Brazil here, and you've been living here for 10, 20, 30 years. And then if you one day you decided to go back to Brazil, and for some reason you don't have money, to establish yourself in Brazil in a better condition than when you left, you cannot even teach English.
True. That does happen a lot. People go to the US, they work for some time at McDonald's or whatever, they come back, they become English teachers. It might sound like I'm throwing shade right now. Maybe I am a little bit. But yeah, that does happen. I do I think you mentioned two interesting things there. Um oh, but before I do mention that, let me say there were a few things you said that I liked.
Mm.
Um
You said
oh
something, you said throwing shade.
yeah, to throw shade.
Mm.
You know this one?
I, I heard, but I don't really remember. What is that
Mm.
about?
Let's see if we can find the definition in the dictionary right here.
Mm-hmm.
Do something, slightly shift of something. Uh, Prevent, no, nope, nope. I think we're not gonna find it in the dictionary because it's a slang.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Parker to gradually change. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be here. To throw shade. So it's like to say something that will, some sort of judgment on someone, So if I say something judgmentally, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, there are many people that they work at McDonald's for a while, they come back and they become English teachers. So you can understand from that I'm saying it sort of in a negative way, that I disapprove of that. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
so you're throwing shade. It's a term that became very popular because of drag queen culture. So if you think about RuPaul Drag Race,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so there are many slangs that were popular in that group or LGBTQ culture, but they just expanded. Another one is, come
Okay.
on, spill the tea, which is like, tell me the gossip, tell me the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yes.
started from
Mm-hmm.
there, but many people use it these days and
Mm-hmm.
they don't know that it came from there. Yeah, so
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
that would be another one, to spill the tea.
Mm-hmm.
Ways you could use them. It could be, come on, don't leave me hanging, spill the tea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say for my originally one, come on, stop throwing shade. That's not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So stop like judging
Mm-hmm.
or making judgmental comments. So you could put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I did like that you said the day to day. So I thought it was a nice phrase,
Mm-hmm.
day to day. So for example, I think you said parents can't take part in their children's day to day. So I really like that one. I like to use the adjective straightforward. And so that's a very nice way to say direct. Yeah, I think you said I'm more straightforward, more direct in English.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Instead of indirect or yeah, or indirect. I can't think of a good alternative for indirect right now. Maybe it'll come to me. But
Mm-hmm.
straightforward is pretty good. But you made me think about two adjectives that we use a lot in English, especially if you are into psychology. I don't think we use a lot in Portuguese, which would be agreeable and
Mm-hmm.
disagreeable. Which in psychology, you would use it to say that if you are agreeable, you're likely to say yes to people. It's like, oh, Sophia, can
Mm-hmm.
you just, okay, yes, I will. Even if it's not like the best thing for you, you would do it. And if you're disagreeable, you're more likely to say no
Mm-hmm.
if there is no good reason or it's not interesting for you. Like, can you just, oh, no, I can't, I'm sorry. So you would be
Mm-hmm.
uh, labeled as disagreeable. And that's another nice verb, to label
Mm-hmm.
somebody.
Mm-hmm.
What is a label? So there's a red label. That's not what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I mean, I could have it, but that's not what I wanted. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, well, it's not here, but if you label someone, like, you give them a title. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Sophia is problematic because she doesn't wants to do things. Or you just say no to things that don't make sense to you, right? Or you
Mm-hmm.
get
Yep.
labeled as annoying. So people now say, oh, he is the annoying guy. I
Mm-hmm.
often got
Because
labeled
they
as
don't
arrogant.
people that tend to not conform, they are labeled as you just said the word
Annoying?
rude. No,
Rude.
rude, yeah, rude, annoying. Um,
Not a team
yeah,
player.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can use disagreeable to for this. Like
Mm-hmm.
it is a piece of language that if you read books on psychology or even like self-help or self-development books, people will mention agreeable and
Mm-hmm.
disagreeable. And usually with the perspective. professional perspective, that it's better to be disagreeable
Mm-hmm.
because then you take better care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I agree with that.
I
My
think that
problem is,
depend on the, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say that one of my problems is I'm too agreeable. So I'm very likely to say yes. So I need to work on saying no. But go
I
ahead.
think the problem about being too agreeable is that you are easily abused.
Mhm. Yes. I want to say that
Mhm.
abused is a very strong word in English. But let's take a look.
Harassed.
To use something for the wrong purposes in a way that's harmful or morally wrong. Yeah, so abuse
Yeah.
it's very strong,
Mhm.
like morally wrong. So I would
Mhm.
say perhaps you're taken advantage of.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's also bad, but abuse makes me already think about like physical abuse, sexual abuse. So there's all these
Sexual
very
abuse.
strong
Okay.
words associated with it. And taking
Mhm.
advantage of it is can be like, oh, like I got you to work an extra hour for me, so it could go like that's awful.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it's not as bad as abuse in a
Mhm.
way. Yeah. So
You know, one thing that I never heard in English, or maybe because I didn't really pay attention, or because there's another term for that, is emotional or psychological harassment.
mm,
Do we have that?
what do you mean? Do you mean like chantage emocional? Is that what you mean?
Um, assédio emocional, o
Hmm.
assédio psicológico. We have that in professional environment, in corporate environment.
Mhm.
And I say that because here I don't see a lot of that because people know a little bit more how to say no or put boundaries. But
Mhm.
here they have more like sexual harassment.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? In
Yeah.
Brazil is like the really thin line on the sexual harassment because we um our culture is more sexualized than American, I think,
Mhm.
in a way that um, we say that a lot in our day-to-day lives,
Mhm.
We make jokes, we have a lot of cussing phrases, that has that side of things. And
Mhm.
and here it's more weirdo, you know. So I don't
Mhm.
know if we have a word or term for psychological or emotional harassment.
Yeah, I think we can ask. Let's ask our good friend ChatGPT. I want to say emotional abuse and emotional harassment happen. And maybe what happens is that
Mm-hmm.
there are more specific words for specific situations. So, for example,
Mm-hmm.
if we think about workplace, but also relationships, I think about gaslighting. And so, for example,
Gaslight.
that's
Okay.
a more
Mm-hmm.
specific term, which,
Mm-hmm.
let's see, what's gaslighting? I'm not sure how to explain right now.
Mm-hmm.
Psychological manipulation makes another person question their own memories, perception, their sanity. Yeah, so let's see if I'm in a relationship and I've been cheated on before by the same person, and I see some text and maybe like, what's
Mm-hmm.
happening here? They say, oh, you don't trust me.
Mm-hmm.
You have no reason to think that. But I do. Yeah, so that would be
Mm-hmm.
gaslighting. At work as well could be
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, uh, you say you try to help, but then you're always shut down. And then they say, oh, but you
Mm-hmm.
never help. Like you're trying to, but they ignore you. Um,
But for example, when a boss um, come to the employee and start yelling, putting down the person, putting down, like bad words, so It's not gaslighting because
Mhm.
gaslighting is very subtle.
Mhm. Yeah, I say it in English. What were the terms we were discussing? Emotional harassment
Harassment, emotional harassment.
isn't a very common phrase. Emotional
Mm-hmm.
abuse, psychological abuse,
Yeah, abuse.
manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
gaslighting, emotional harm in relationships. Yeah, so emotional abuse,
In a
workplace
workplace context.
bullying.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Oh,
good
yeah.
one.
Mm-hmm.
Might be more common.
Mm-hmm.
Workplace bullying. I like that.
Good. Mm-hmm.
I like
A
that.
good one.
And we can double check very quickly with Ngram. Probably, I think we're gonna see emotional abuse is more common. But let's
Mm-hmm.
put it anyway. Emotional abuse. What was the other word? Workplace bullying.
Harassment. Oh, workplace. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so emotional abuse is more common, but it's also more
Mm-hmm.
flexible, right? Because it can talk about regular relationships. So workplace bullying is also
Mm-hmm.
a good one.
Mm-hmm. Good one. Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. I will mention so to steer back, another nice phrase, yeah. So to
Mm-hmm. You still back?
steer back
Mm-hmm.
to what we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I agree what you mean about language. Like language can be a great barrier because when I moved to Russia, I didn't speak any Russian, and unlike with Spanish, where I can understand something, I understood nothing. So I
Mm-hmm.
did have that experience of living in a country I didn't speak the language, and by the time I left, I was getting close to intermediate level. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I I did experience lots of like the problem of like I don't want to leave home because when I leave home, people are gonna talk to me and then I'm gonna have to talk back. And there's always like
Mm-hmm.
this, shit, I don't want to go through the trouble or like entering a shop. And then I know that the lady's gonna come and ask me if she can help me. And then I'm gonna say I'm just
Mm-hmm.
browsing. And then she's gonna say, oh, but how can really what can I do? And then I'll say, I'm sorry, I don't speak Russian. They would panic. They would go grab the manager.
Mm-hmm.
And then, how can I help you, sir? And I'm like, I'm really just browsing. Yeah, so which by the way is a nice
Mm-hmm.
phrase to look at things. You can
Mm-hmm.
always say that when you enter. No, I'm just browsing, and usually they will leave you alone. Except if you can't speak the
Mm-hmm.
language, then they make a point of
Yeah.
like sticking around,
Yeah.
or going for a restaurant and like be like, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that, because I didn't know the names of the things,
Mm-hmm.
and
Interesting.
memorizing patterns in the supermarket, right? Because they
Mm-hmm.
check all your things, doop, 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 and then they're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, sir, cash your card. Okay, do you have like they would call it a shop card. And so like well, what could we call that in English? Another word for it.
The ma the members card like
There
that?
you go. Yes, a member's card to get discounts. And it's like, and at first I didn't understand what it was. So I was like, what? No, I just want cash, cash, cash,
Mm-hmm.
cash. Like, so panic and things like that. So I did experience that. So hopefully, if people immigrate, they immigrate, in the language, because otherwise it's
Mm-hmm.
really problematic. Also making friends if you don't work at a job that requires you
Mm-hmm.
to speak the language. And so
Mm-hmm.
you need to learn it. Going on Tinder dates without knowing the language is also difficult for anyone who doesn't know that. And so here, I put it on the table. You can do
Yes.
it. I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
Not as easy as you might think. There are some benefits,
I
but
believe.
more drawbacks. So,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. It's like I don't mean to be judgmental to people that don't speak English or doesn't speak a second or a third language in a country that they are living in, you know. Um, but what bothers me the most is the lack of interest in
mhm.
learning. because I know that everyone has a learning curve. Learning curve,
Mm-hmm.
says
That's a
here.
great one. Yeah.
Um, different, so what is easy for me cannot be easy for someone else. But not even wanting to, you know, like the laziness, it's something that bothers me, you know.
Yeah.
It's not my problem at all, you know.
No, it is
It's
not.
not my problem. But for example, going back to the first subject we were talking about immigration,
Mm-hmm.
okay? So back then in 2009, I think, or 2008, when Obama was running, or the first year that he was president, one of the things that he said was like, okay, people want to stay here and become a citizen, nice, no problem. But they will need to learn the language, they will need to learn the laws, they will need to pay their taxes, like any other citizen. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
legit,
Yeah.
So like, for example, when you become a citizen here, you needed to do a test, a knowledge test. And it can be hard. If you I have a friend, she tried to do her esthetician test on the state board, and she did 39 times because she couldn't read the questions. And then, she knew everything because she was already an esthetician in Brazil. But here is different. You have laws that you don't have in Brazil. And she couldn't answer the test because she couldn't, you know, read English. And got to a point that people at the state board was already so tired to see her. Like, I think they felt pity on her. And I was like, okay, here your license, because like you clearly will not get it. You clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of you working without a license, here, go, bye. You
Yeah.
know?
She wore them out. Yeah, so she made them tired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then
It's
I think it's really um it is something that Trump brought back.
mhm.
Okay, if you want to stay here, you're gonna need it to follow some rules. So, and I think it's something that to any country, it should be like
Mhm.
that. I don't know how it is to Brazil. I don't know the immigration laws I'm sorry, to stay in Brazil, but
Mhm.
should be, you should be at least capable of make yourself understood,
Yeah.
understand the basics.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it connects to another question can be our last question is, do you
Mhm.
think that immigrants should be encouraged to maintain their original culture or should they adapt to the new culture? So specifically this last part, adapt to the new culture. I think we're already touching on that a little bit.
Mhm.
And you made me think of two things. One is actually three things. One that unfortunately doesn't have a very good translation, but that I feel
Mhm.
like Brazilians abroad, I think this is fair to say about most, if not all, nationalities, but I'm Brazilian, so I'm going to speak for Brazilians. We are very, in Portuguese, we would say bairristas, right? And
Mhm.
there isn't a very good word for that, unfortunately, but we can say that we like to stick together. So that might be a way to
Mhm.
describe. We don't have that word. And that can be
Mhm.
nice in the sense that we get support, right? I
Mhm.
often hear stories about how the Brazilian community helps each other, but that can also be a crutch, right? And
Mhm.
crutch is exactly the right word here, I think, because it gives that image like if you break your leg, you need crutches, right, to move. So the beautiful thing about a
Mhm.
crutch is if you have a problem walking, it will help you stay up, but you also can't
Mhm.
run with crutches on. So it's like the thing that
Mhm.
helps you do the minimum is also the thing that is stopping you from doing your maximum. And I see that sticking togetherness as that problem, as you
Mm,
know, like I often hear people, oh, all my friends are Brazilians. I don't have American friends. I don't really speak English because everybody around me speaks Portuguese. And when
exactly.
I was living in Moscow, I did meet a Brazilian community, and they I disliked being part of them, and they didn't like me very much because it was mutual. Because they wanted to do things, and they invited me. I was like, "Great, can I bring this person?" And I was like, "Oh no, if he comes, we're gonna have to speak English. We don't want to speak English." And I'll be like, "Okay, so I'm not going because he is a good friend of mine. I want him to go. I want to be with them."
Right.
And I would like to be with you, but if it's, and I understand, like, we want to speak Portuguese, we want to have our mini Brazil here, but I also felt like I didn't come to live abroad to be friends only with Brazilians.
To leave Brazil. Yes,
Yeah, so
yes.
I don't want to give up Brazil, but I don't.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to be around Brazilians all the time, I would stay in Brazil, right?
Stay in Brazil. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there is a
I'm
little bit of
very
that.
judged because of that. I can tell
Hmm.
you, you know. Um, it's fun because um, before answering the question, just something that happened to me. Since I moved here, I I used to go to an American church. Okay. Um, and when I lived in Greenville, South Carolina, I used to go to an American church, and then here, and then Orlando, and then when I came back here in Atlanta, American church. You know, because it helps me with my English, helps me to understand the culture, it helps me to, all these things that we've been talking here. If I
Hmm.
want to leave Brazilian culture, I would have stayed in Brazil, period. Okay. Um, and then last a year and a half ago, my therapist told me, "Oh, why don't you go and visit my cousin's church?" I was like, "You've been my therapist for 4 years and then don't even know that you have a cousin and he has a church here." And I went to visit and he came to talk to me. And I was really straightforward with him. And I said, "Look, I don't like Brazilian's church. I don't have a lot of Brazilians friends. I don't like the way Brazilians act, here. So I don't know if I'm gonna stay at your church, because Brazilians usually think in a way that I don't like. I was very like open and ended up that I stayed in the church. People are very different from what I was used to. It's a very different Brazilian community. Um, People that are very open-minded. They really want to embrace the American culture. They really want to understand, the living. So it's different from all the other people that I was used to um, conviver.
Um, live with all the other
Yeah.
people I used to, yeah, live with. There might be other words, but this is
Mhm.
the most
Mhm.
common one to use there.
Mhm. So that I understood, and then, but then I understood how much prejudiced
Hmm.
I was, but not because I don't like my people, not because I don't like my culture, not because I'm denying everything that I am and everything that I was or the place that I was born. It's not about that, but it's what you just said. If I want to live like Brazil, I would have stayed in Brazil. So doesn't in my mind doesn't make any sense, to live in a little Brazil.
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know. And then we go back to the question you made, like maintain the original culture or they adapt. I think that they can do both things.
Mm-hmm.
I think just depend on where you were.
Yeah. Uh,
So I know that Brazilian culture is very adaptive and I'm very malleable to
Smart.
how we are and how people are, and um, I can bring that to my life. I can understand, I can learn, but I'm not gonna be 100% Brazilian in the midst of a lot of Americans.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to adapt. When I'm
Yeah.
with them, I needed to think, I needed to talk, I needed to be like them.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not gonna act in my corporate environment like I act at home. So it's pretty much
Mm-hmm.
that. In my point of view, it's pretty much like that. I can maintain my original culture, but in order to learn to live the best of what the country has to offer to you, you needed to adapt to the new culture where you are. So I think there are two different things. I think they can live
Mm-hmm.
with each other.
In this case,
My
in the original sentence, you said live with, I think was the best option. Here you could also use coexist. So these two things can
yeah,
coexist. Uh,
coexist.
and we can use exactly as we would use coexistir in Portuguese. So, um,
Okay. Mhm.
uh, yeah, I
Mhm.
agree. I agree. I will get canceled, but I agree. I'm kidding. I do think that they can coexist, as we said. And I agree with you that essentially it needs to take, it's just that because we are the migrant culture, so it needs to take a
Mhm.
back seat. So I think that that's a good
Yes.
expression to use here. And so you have the front seat that
Mhm.
is driving, and you have the back seat, which is there for the ride.
Mhm.
And I never forget when I was living in Moscow, there were a few Iranians in there as well, and in the same company that I worked for. And I got to know like two of them very well. One of them was a very nice girl. I was actually surprised from hearing everything that I've heard about Iran, how progressive and
Mhm.
it will sound bad, but free she was to do whatever she wanted to do.
Mhm.
But I also met this guy who I felt was like what most of the negative things I heard from Iran. Like he
Mhm.
embodied. And so that's an also nice verb to embody, to be like the
Embody.
body representation of that. But which was funny that it was around the time that they killed one Iranian general with a drone, and then he bought like alcohol for everybody to celebrate the death of the general. And they were like, "But you don't drink." It's like, "Yeah, I don't drink, but you guys can drink. Like, drink on me." So that was a funny thing. But why do I bring him up? It's
Mhm.
because I was forced to live with him for a while. We were in a camp together. We were both teaching there, and he would always comment on things that Russians did that he thought were ridiculous, or that he thought were wrong, or that he thought were stupid.
Mhm.
All the time, like they put this on their bread. This is awful. Like, oh, can you see the way
Mhm.
that she's walking? She couldn't do that. So he was always using his cultural
Diminishing.
standards and ideas to judge others. And obviously, you can say, oh,
Mhm.
yeah, well, like everybody does that. Yes, everybody does that, but some people do it inside their
Too
own
much.
selves quietly, and
Mhm.
others need to voice that. And I just felt like it was
Mhm.
always a lot of negativity. And I was like, dude, like the way they cooked the eggs, and I'm like, you don't have to eat it if you don't want to. It's like you can go and
Mhm.
the same thing that we people say all the time. You can go back home to your country if it's as bad as it
Yes.
is. And I said, no,
Mhm.
I'm not really saying much, but it was like all the time. So even if he didn't realize how he was putting the local culture down And I get that perhaps he left not because he necessarily wanted it to leave. Some people are in those situations, right? But it's like
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a matter of respect to the country. Like you are, I see it as a
Yes.
guest. Maybe if I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just an immigrant, sorry, if I wasn't just there for work and I was like, I'm gonna build my life here, I would have a
Mm-hmm.
different opinion. But I don't think so. I think I would just think the same way even more. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this country, these people exist before I came here. So, like I don't go to a person's
Mm-hmm.
home and I just uh, pee on the floor and walk around with my dirty shoes and then I leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
I respect the way they do. Oh, you want me to take the shoes off? Okay, I'll take the shoes off. Oh, okay. You want me to, I don't know, anything that is reasonable, right? So we do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it's
Um,
respectful. No.
yeah. Maybe there might be things that in your culture it would be unacceptable. Like let's say if you come from a mostly vegetarian culture and then you see people eating meat, that might be like, oh my God, that might feel wrong. But then again,
Mm-hmm.
it's not your culture. Like you can, but that's tricky, and we can get into that in another day. For now, I'll just share the last bits of feedback that I have. We said
Mm-hmm.
some very nice words there. You did say learning curve earlier. I really like that
Mm-hmm.
learning curve, and I think you said everybody has their own learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
Really like that one. I mentioned to stick together, which is a verb. So not by hista, which is an
Mm-hmm.
adjective, but it would work to stick
Mm-hmm.
together. So you could say Brazilians like to stick together. Stick together like glue.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned the word crutch,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
and we can use it physically, so literally to mean this, yeah, anything that helps you walk,
Mm-hmm.
but you can also use it
Mm-hmm.
figuratively, right? So to talk about emotional crutch or anything
Mm-hmm.
really that um, yeah, that would support you, that would help you. And
Mm-hmm.
most times it's helpful, but it can also be a problem in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, for example, let's say a very negative example of that. Um, he uses his partner as a crutch
Mm-hmm.
uh, and avoid making friends. So in this case, the partner becomes the everything for this person, and then that's
Mm-hmm.
like the excuse, the reason. Oh, I don't need friends because I have my partner, and that can be
Mm-hmm.
cute, but eventually that could be a problem, right? I think people
Mm-hmm.
need other friends.
You used a very nice phrase. I'll try to repeat. The same crutch that helps to walk is the one that avoid
I think
to what did it say?
that helps you
Uh,
walk. I
to
don't. I think you're improving my sentence, but I'll take credit for your improvement.
yeah.
So that helps you walk. The crutch that helps
Is
you
there
walk is
one
the same
thing
that stops you from running, let's say.
from running? Yes. Uh-huh. I think it says everything.
Yeah, the crutch. That's very poetic and philosophical, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Just delete the
Yep.
crutch, the same there to make it nice. Helps you walk. Stops you from
Nice.
running. Yeah, so that's I think I said something like doing the minimum that helps you do the minimum is what stops you from doing the maximum. But this is more poetic, so let's keep it that
Mm-hmm.
way. Now there is a word you said
Just to
that
give you an example,
go ahead.
go ahead. No, just an example. I have a friend. He's been here for 6 years now, and he was like, "Oh, I cannot learn English. I cannot learn English. It's very hard. I'm already too old. All the excuses possible." And then he went to work with a guy that just speaks English, an American guy. Even though he has a lot of Brazilian friends, he just refuses to speak any word in Portuguese, even though he understands.
Mhm.
So my Brazilian friend working with this guy needed to learn English, you know,
Mhm.
and now he's working in a city that doesn't have Brazilians at all. So he's just working with Americans. And so he needed to like he
Mhm.
gave his jumps.
I was thinking about that. I was thinking about expression. He was giving his jumps. Yeah.
Yeah.
It,
He needed to leave the crutch behind him.
yeah, he did. It's not as fun as dar seus pulos, but I guess in this way, if we needed
Mhm.
to say it in English, you could say he did what needed to be done,
Mhm.
or he found a way. So not as colorful as dar seus
Is
pulos, but it worked.
that were jokes?
So you did. I said something, and then you said it exactly at the same time. So I'm going to highlight that because that's a very nice phrase. Go ahead. Yeah.
Mhm.
So if we are ever in a situation where oh, someone says at the same time, and we'd like, who goes first? I like that. So since I did it and you did it, I think that's a good
Mhm.
sign that it's a useful word. Um, and I just use the adjective colorful.
Mhm.
So we can use, I said something like, it's not as colorful as das seus pulos.
Mhm.
So give your jumps. I'll put it in English.
Mhm.
uh,
I never,
uh,
I never heard colorful you being used in that way.
yeah, it would be you'll be use it as opposed to like black and
Mhm.
white. So to say like more
Uh-huh.
interesting, more exciting,
Mhm.
funnier.
Yeah.
So you could say, for example, you hear
Mhm.
something and oh, that's a very colorful term, or that's a very colorful
Mhm.
expression, and I would understand that. Oh, that's an interesting way to say that. You
Yeah.
know.
Mhm.
So not as
Very
colorful
nice.
as keep your job. Yeah. So when I say it's not as colorful, I'm
Mhm.
essentially saying it's boring. Yeah, but it's
Mhm.
there. But I will. Well, I put something here that I can't read, but I did. I can read my own handwriting. But you said an adjective that is amazing, so I'm going to put it here. Malleable, and I misspelt it, so but we have it here.
Mhm.
Malleable, easily
Mhm.
influenced, trained, or controlled. I forget
Mhm.
exactly the sentence you used. I think it said something like people need
Mhm.
to be more malleable in the sense that they need to be more adaptable,
Flexible.
flexible. Yes.
Mhm.
So it's not, we wouldn't get it from this definition here, but it's like if you're thinking
Mhm.
about yourself, like you can control yourself, you can influence, train yourself. So that would give us the idea of flexibility.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
I'll put here people need to be I'm not sure how what he said exactly, but it was beautiful.
I don't
So just put
remember.
malleable.
I remember saying the word, but I don't remember the phrase.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't even about people, but it was a nice one. So if people are listening
Mhm.
to this, go back, find it because it was very nice. People
Mhm.
are need to be more malleable. Uh, maybe it was something else. I'll put these other example from here. There you go. Mother wanted me to be a malleable girl who would take her advice.
Mhm.
And so just a girl that would listen to her and do what she said. So here it's
Mhm.
in a negative kind of tone, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
But you didn't use it in a negative way. I really wanted to remember. I'll go
No,
back and check
I
later.
word it in a positive way.
Yeah. So there you go. That's it.
Mhm.
Sophia, thank you very much for the
Good.
conversation and for your time. And
Absolutely. It was really, really nice. Let's do it
mhm.
more times.